Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, Rabbi.
We are learning Mishnah Shabbos, Parak Yud, chapter 10. We're up to Mishnah Beis, Mishnah 2. I'd like to dedicate this morning's learning in memory of my mother, Mrs. Shalom Mr. Binowitz, Shalom Mr. Rabbi Yaakov Eliezer. Should be an aliyah for her neshama. Okay. Now, we're going to now be discussing the actual act of transferring, the actual act, the actual malacha, the actual private activity of going from transferring something from a private domain to a public domain or vice versa. We're now going to be discussing some of the laws of that itself. Okay, so here we go. Hamaitzi achlin, somebody who takes out food, which means he's going from his house and he takes it out of his house. Now, were he to go ahead and put it into the public domain, and he picks it up from his house, walks out of his house, goes into the Rishus, our public domain, let's call it for our own sake, a public thoroughfare, and he were to put it down there, that would have been considered, doing the malacha of haitzah, of transferring from a private domain to public domain. But in this case, what did the person do? Unesanan alo hiskufa, he put it down on a porch. There was this porch in front of his house. Okay. Now, here we have to spend a little time in explaining what's going on here. To be considered a private domain, the area has to be walled in on all four sides. A public domain has no walls, and let's just keep it simple right now, it's a public thoroughfare. Lots and lots of people walk through. Then there's a in-between state. It's called a Carmelis. Carmelis is something it's not a Rishus HaYachid, it's not a private domain, it's not a Rishus HaRab, it's not a public domain. And really, according to Torah law, if you want to take something out of your house and put it into a Carmelis, or vice versa, or you're going to go from a Rishus HaRab public domain and put it down in a Carmelis, that kind of an area that we call a Carmelis, you're allowed to do it. According to Torah law, you're allowed to do it. Rabbinic law prohibited it, because since it's similar to both, they didn't want people to transfer into a Carmelis or from a Carmelis. From a Torah from the Torah law, a Carmelis is not an area that you have any kind of prohibition of transferring into. So in this case, this porch, we'll explain soon, has the status of a Carmelis. That's what it has. So what this person did right now is he took the food out of his house. Unesanan ala haskufa. He put this food down on the porch. Mishna continues, bein shachazar v'haitzian, whether he goes then and takes the food from the Carmelis and then further takes it out and puts it into the public domain, into Rishus HaRabim, bein shaitzian acher, whether somebody else did it, pater, exempt. Shaloi asa malach b'vas achas, because he did not do his act in one shot. Meaning, you took it out of your house, you put it down in the eskufa, and then you picked it up from the eskufa, and you took it to the public domain. You didn't go directly from a private domain to a public domain. You split it up. You did one act of transferring from your house to the Carmelis, then another act for transferring from the Carmelis to the Rishus HaRabim. That's not the Torah act. That's not the Torah malacha of haitzah, of transferring. You got to go from the private domain to the public domain, b'vas achas, in one act, in one time, or vice versa. But here, eventually you transferred it from your house, the private domain, to the street, the public domain, but you made a stop in between. You did something else, and you broke it up. You did one act of the private domain to the Carmelis, then another one from the Carmelis to the public domain. That's not the Torah. That's not the Torah prohibition of transferring. Okay, that's the point of the Mishnah. And clearly when the Mishnah says whether you did it or somebody else did it, meaning whether you then took it from the Carmelis to the public domain or somebody else did, you're exempt. Of course you're exempt if somebody else finishes it. You didn't even finish, so to speak. So, but the Mishnah still says, or somebody else took it, you're exempt. And of course you're exempt. You didn't do anything, but you didn't even finish you didn't even do the other half. But the point really is to teach us the following, and that is whenever the term patur, exempt, comes in the Mishnah, Exempt means to say, if you were to do this unintentionally on Shabbos, you'd be exempt from a carbon chatos, from a sin offering, because it's not a Torah act. It's not a Torah. You didn't do a Torah prohibition. But pater means exempt, but forbidden to do anyway, because the sages forbade it. So therefore, even if all you did was, so to speak, a half an act, all you did was move it from your private domain, your house, into the Carmelist, and you didn't do anything further, that's still forbidden according to the Rabbanan to do. Still forbidden according to the Rabbanan to do. Even if somebody else finished it, it's still forbidden for you to do half of the act, even half of the act. It's forbidden for you to do an act of transferring it to a Carmelist, even though you never then afterwards took it in the public domain. That itself is forbidden midrabanan, just moving it into a Carmelist.
What is the term for something that's perfectly acceptable?
Okay. So here you go. So now that you mentioned that, let's go through that a little bit here. And that's the following. What a Carmelist, let me read to you from over here. This porch that we're talking about, which is again located between the house, you have the house, the porch, the public domain, is at least 4 tvachim wide, 4 handbreadths wide, which is about 16 inches wide, 4 tvachim long, 4 handbreadths long, and between 3 and 9 tvachim high. 3 handbreadths from the ground, but less than 10 tvachim high. Why is that? So here we go. An area smaller than 4 by 4 tvachim is not even a Carmelist. Rather, it is called a makom patur, exempt area. And carrying into and out of an exempt area is permitted even according to rabbinic law. So there's your answer to what you just asked. A place that would be permissible without question, even according to rabbinic law, is called a makom patur. What's that? It's not, its dimensions are less than 4 by 4 tvachim. Okay? So therefore, we're calling this a Carmelist. This is a Carmelist, this porch. So it's got to be at least 4 by 4. Now, if the porch were lower than 3 tvachim, less than 3 handbreadths off the ground, it would be considered part of the adjacent Rishus Harabim. It would be considered part of the Rishus Harabim that's next to it, which means like this. Less than 3 tvachim off the ground is considered like it's on the ground. That's the law, right? Even when you have a porch, you built up something 3 tvachim off the ground, but if it's less than 3 tvachim, less than 3 tvachim, it's considered like the ground. It's like it's on the ground.
So it's public domain.
So therefore, it's considered a continuation of the public domain that it's next to. Okay? So therefore, again, if we're calling this a Carmelist, it's got to be above 3 tvachim. Now, were it to be 10 or more tvachim high, you took this porch and you made it 10 tvachim high. That's 40 inches high. Okay? It would be Rishus HaYachid. Then it would be a private domain. If you go ahead, right, and you outside build a box, and it's 10 tvachim by 10 tvachim, 10 tvachim high rather, if not 10 tvachim, 10 tvachim high, and it's 4 by 4, you just created a private domain, because we see the sides of the box as if they continue upward, and you got 4 walls. So therefore, if we're calling this a Carmelist, it can't be 10 tvachim high. All right. So now, if it were between, so 1 second, we said, it's between 3 and 9 tvachim high, right? That's what we said. That means there's still one more tavach we have to account for, right? Between 9 and 10. So if this would have been, 9, if this would have been between 9 and 10 tvachim high, meaning between 9 and up to 10 tvachim, it would also be part of the public domain next to it, because the public would use it by momentarily resting their burdens on it in order to reposition them on their backs or shoulders. Meaning, you've got this kind of a box or a pillar in the middle of a public, in a public domain, next to public domain, right? No one's stepping on it. It's too high to step on. So maybe it shouldn't be part of the public domain. The answer is no, it is. Because at that height, between 9 and 10, people who are carrying things, not on Shabbos necessarily, but carrying things always under normal circumstances, or during the weekday rather, they would go ahead, if they have something on their back and they need to reposition it, what do? They go over to this pole, this pillar, this kind of platform or pillar, and they kind of rest it on it to reposition that they can carry it. So that means in the public, people in the public thoroughfare, they would use it for their purposes. And therefore, at that height, it would be considered part of the public domain. But once it's less than 9, they don't use it for that. So if we have something that is between 3 and 9, 4 by 4, what do we have? A carmelis. And that's what this porch was. Okay? That is the explanation to this first half of the Mishnah. We're not done yet. Next part of the Mishnah. Kupa shimalea peiros. You've got a basket, and it's full of produce. Unasana aliskufa hachitzaina. And he put it on an outer porch. Okay? This outer porch has the status of a public domain. All right? Let me just read to you how they explain it here. This outer porch, in contrast to the porch mentioned above, is a porch or step next to the street that is less than 3 tvachim high. Because it is so low, it's considered part of an adjacent Rishus Harabim. So some kind of a little platform next to Rishus Harabim. It's less than 3 tvachim high, right? People call it a porch, but as you said before, it's considered a part of the public domain because it's like it's the ground. Now, so you've got this outer porch is right next to your house again. Okay. Now you have this box of produce. Unasana ala skufa chitzaina, and you put the box on this outer porch. But you didn't put the whole box out there. Some of the box is still in your house, and some of the box is on the outer porch. I mean, some of the box is still in the private domain, and some of the box is in the public domain. Even though the majority of the produce is outside, the majority of the produce inside the box is on the outer porch, that means it's in the public domain, putter. You're exempt until you take out the entire box. So again, you shouldn't do this, right? You're not supposed to do this. But if you want to know, have you transgressed a Torah prohibition? Would you need to bring a carbon chat sin offering if you did it intentionally? The answer is no. Because since the whole box is not outside, you haven't transferred the whole thing out. You haven't done the Torah prohibition of transferring. Now, but there's still qualification to this because it depends what's in the box. If in the box you've got these like long vegetables, they call them a gourd, cucumber, right? A long cucumber. So let's say you've got a box of a bunch of long cucumbers, right? And when you put part of the box outside and part of the box inside, right? So you've got part of the vegetable outside and part of the vegetable inside. That's when we say, but you didn't transfer the whole thing out. But let's say instead of having long cucumbers in there, you've got sesame seeds, right? You got sesame seeds. So, and now we have some of the sesame seeds are outside and some of the sesame seeds are inside. Then we say, you've transferred the sesame seeds outside, right? Assuming we have enough sesame seeds to be considered the amount that's significant for transferring, right? Since the sesame seeds are not one long thing, they're separate things, and I have enough sesame seeds that's outside, although the whole box isn't outside, but the sesame seeds in the box are outside, you have done the act of transferring. Just because part of the box is inside, that doesn't make a difference. What really makes a difference is what's inside the box. What's inside the box really going to determine the status of the box. If I have the sesame seeds, even though part of the seeds are inside, so fine, they weren't transferred. But the ones outside, they were transferred. So from the point of the sesame seeds, I've done a full transfer. It's like the whole box went outside from their part, and I did haitzah. So when the Mishna says that you're exempt in the case where the majority was out, but part of it was in, that's talking about when it's a long vegetable, right? So part of the vegetable itself, the vegetables themselves are still inside. That's when we say, if you don't take the whole thing out, then it's not considered you did transferring on Shabbos. When the Mishnah says you're exempt until you take the whole box out, the whole box really means, right? As long as you make sure you've got one of those things of produce that's completely outside, then you'll be liable. Then it's considered you transferred it. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Interesting proof.
Okay, so meanwhile,